The first crack appeared the moment I heard my chipped mug hit the counter, hard enough to make me flinch, soft enough that no one else reacted. Lydia, my sister-in-law, didn't even look at me as she set it down. She just shrugged and said, "Oh. I thought this was one of the cheap ones." Before continuing with the story, thank you for coming here. For more stories, please subscribe to the channel. And please mention where you listened to it in the comments. Thank you. It wasn't. It was my favorite mug, the one I used during early morning strategy calls, the one with the tiny chip on the rim I'd memorized like a familiar scar. I'd told them before, don't use that one. It wasn't about the mug. It was about boundaries. But they never cared about those. I glanced at my husband, Eric, sitting at the dining table with his parents and sister, laughing at something his mother had said. He didn't see the mug. He didn't see the tension. He didn't see me. He hadn't seen me for a while. I picked it up quietly and placed it in the sink, letting the warm water run over the ceramic chip. I'd learned long ago that disrespect rarely started with shouting, it started with tiny, deliberate acts. Things people pretend are accidents so they can call you dramatic if you point it out. Lydia brushed past me, her perfume a cloud of something expensive and sharp. "You really should reorganize your kitchen," she said. "Nothing is where it should be." I forced a small smile. "It's where I need it to be." She raised an eyebrow as if confused why my preferences mattered in my own home. Then came the next comment, thrown casually into the air like crumbs to birds. "My brother deserves a bigger house." "A better one," she said. "This neighborhood is fine. But it's not the kind of place I picture him raising a family." The room went quiet for a split second. I waited for Eric to correct her. To say, "We bought this house together." Or even, "Don't talk about my wife's home like that." Instead, he just laughed, almost nervously. "LYD, come on, don't start." "Start?" She had already started. His mother chimed in next. "We're only being honest. You deserve more, sweetheart. A home with proper hosting space. This one is, well, it's her taste." Her. Not my name. Not his wife. Just her. I felt something in my chest tighten, not pain, not anger. Recognition. The kind you get when you realize a pattern you've ignored has been repeating for years. But I didn't react. I never do, not at first. My strength has never been in yelling. It's in watching. Studying. Understanding the game before I decide to play. His father leaned back in his chair. "Anyway, we were thinking maybe you two should spend more time at our place. You know, proper family dinners, maybe some long weekends. Help you get away from all this." He gestured vaguely around my kitchen. My kitchen. I turned and poured myself water I didn't need, just to give my hands something to do. Behind me, I heard Lydia's voice sink into a hushed tone, the kind people use when they want you to hear them but want plausible deniability. "She doesn't even work in a real office. How stressful can her job actually be?" "I work in strategic procurement for a tech firm, negotiating contracts worth more than her yearly salary." But explaining that to someone like her would be like explaining color to someone who only believes in black and white. Still, I waited. Eric could say something here. He could defend me. He could shut the conversation down. He didn't. He never does. I stepped out of the kitchen and leaned against the doorway, watching the four of them sitting around my dining table like they owned it. The sunlight behind them filtered through the window blinds, striping the floor in long shadows. And that's when I noticed something else on the table, something small, but not insignificant. A folded paper. It wasn't mine. It wasn't supposed to be there. Lydia slid her phone over it casually, but not before I caught a glimpse. Property review meeting, Thursday 3 p.m., clause discussion. Clause. I knew that word too well. I worked with contracts for a living. I knew exactly what a hidden clause could do. But why would Lydia have something like that? Why would she be involved in anything related to our home? A cold thread unwound in my chest. The disrespect wasn't random. The comments weren't spontaneous. Something was happening behind the scenes. The chipped mug. The paper. The sudden push for family dinners. The way they talked about the house as if it wasn't mine. This wasn't just rudeness. This was positioning. And Eric, my husband, was either participating or being used as a pawn. Either way, I needed clarity. And clarity is something I excel at getting. I stepped back into the room with a calm, steady smile. "Anyone need coffee?" I asked. Forehead shook. Good. Because I needed the kettle to cover the sound of my plan forming, quiet, precise, and already taking shape. They thought they were playing a game. They had no idea I'd just sat down at the table. By Monday morning, the house felt oddly peaceful, not because anything had improved, but because the storm had moved underground. The comments, the looks, the casual dominance they tried to assert over my space, all of it had the same scent as a boardroom coup. Polite smiles over knives. I went to work early, partly to breathe, partly because I needed the distance to think. On my desk sat my chipped mug, the one Lydia had slammed down. I'd brought it intentionally. I liked having small reminders of the lines people crossed. It kept me sharp. While I answered emails, the image of that folded paper kept replaying in my mind. Property review meeting, clause discussion. Normal people don't have those papers lying around. Certainly not sisters-in-law who treat contracts like gossip. The timing bothered me too. For them to be discussing clauses in a property we owned, someone had given them access. And only one person had that capability, Eric. My phone buzzed with a text from him. "Don't forget dinner at Mom's tonight. Everyone's expecting us." Expecting us? Like attendance was mandatory? I typed back, "We'll see." He disliked that response. He always did. Eric liked predictability, especially from me. But the more he clung to convenience over partnership, the more I saw things clearly. At lunch, I opened our digital property folder, something I rarely touched because we'd bought the house jointly and set everything up properly years ago. Except now. I saw a recent login under his account. Friday night. The night before the visit. Then another. Sunday morning, yesterday. And the last one? 30 minutes ago. He was checking something frequently enough to make patterns. There was one file modified yesterday, a scanned copy of our deed. My chest tightened. Not with fear. With focus. I opened it. Everything looked identical: ownership percentages, signatures, property description, until I reached a page I didn't recognize. A page number I had never seen. Addendum. Clause 14b. I leaned in. In the event that one spouse maintains majority financial contribution to the property at time of renegotiation, said spouse may initiate occupancy restructuring pending family approval. Family approval. Not legal approval. Not court approval. Family. My in-laws. This wasn't a real legal clause. No legitimate attorney would write something so vague and unenforceable. But it looked official enough for manipulation. It was meant to intimidate, to scare, to mislead. The date on the addendum? 2 weeks ago. I sat back slowly. Eric hadn't asked me about it. He hadn't mentioned anything about renegotiation. And he had clearly shown this to his family, or they wouldn't be walking around my home commenting on how he deserves better. This wasn't just disrespect. This was an attempted power shift. The chipped mug motif suddenly meant more. Lydia slamming it, claiming it was one of the cheap ones. The conversations about bigger houses, better places, and proper hosting space. They weren't critiquing my taste. They were softening the ground. I called my colleague, Marcus, a contract specialist. Hypothetically, I said, if someone added a fraudulent clause to a shared deed, could it be used against the spouse? He laughed. Only if the spouse doesn't know how to read. So, it wouldn't hold up? Not for a second. But it could be used emotionally. To pressure someone into moving out. Couples fall for that all the time. I felt something settle inside me, not relief. Certainty. They were trying to box me out of my own home. But they didn't know me well enough to know I never enter a game blindly. I needed proof, not legal proof, emotional proof. Something that would show the truth in a way they couldn't spin. And then, like fate was nudging me, I found it. The digital deed file had embedded metadata, timestamps for every modification. Not just the clause, but the device used, the login account, the IP address. Eric's laptop. The next morning, I woke before dawn, before Eric, before the house had a chance to settle into its usual rhythm of avoidance and half-truths. The sky outside was still navy, the air cool. I wrapped my sea blue scarf around my shoulders, the one I always wore on difficult days. It wasn't sentimental, it was strategic. People underestimate a woman who looks composed. I needed that underestimation today. Because today wasn't about confrontation. It was about positioning. By the time Eric stumbled into the kitchen rubbing sleep from his eyes, I was already sipping tea from my chipped mug, the one Lydia had nearly smashed. A reminder of the disrespect they'd planted in my home. And a reminder of what I was willing to uproot. He paused when he saw me. "You're up early." "I have a meeting," I said calmly. "With who? Does it matter?" The answer was no, and he knew it. He poured himself coffee, staring into the mug as if it held answers. "I don't want last night turning into some fight." I stirred my tea slowly. "There won't be a fight. I don't fight when I already know how the outcome ends." He looked at me sharply, as if he sensed something shifting, but he didn't have the courage to ask. Good. Because he didn't deserve the answer yet. When I left the house, the sun was barely breaking over the rooftops. I drove straight to City Records, not because I needed legal backup yet, but because information is power. And power is best wielded quietly. The clerk, a woman in her 50s with reading glasses perched low, pulled up the official deed for our home. She printed it. Stamped it. Handed it to me. No addendum. No clause 14b. No family approval. The fraudulent page existed only in the digital version Eric had modified. Exactly what I needed. And more importantly, something they couldn't explain away later. On my lunch break, I scanned the authentic deed, emailing a copy to my personal drive. Then I printed 3 physical copies and placed the originals in a folder I kept in my office safe. Preparedness was my armor. But there was still one piece missing, a trigger. A moment where everything they'd created collapsed under its own weight. Revenge meant nothing without timing. And timing required patience. When I returned home that evening, the living room lights were on. Eric was on the couch, TV playing some background show he wasn't watching. He looked up when I walked in. "We need to talk." I placed my bag down slowly. "We do." He exhaled, shoulders tense. "Look, yesterday got out of hand. My family, they can be opinionated. They didn't mean. They meant every word." He faltered. "You're being unfair." "No," I said softly. "I'm being observant." He ran a hand through his hair. "They aren't trying to hurt you." "Then why did you add a clause to our deed without telling me?" His mouth actually fell open. He hadn't realized I'd found it. His first mistake. I wasn't trying to trick you," he stammered. "It was just a draft. Something Dad and I were brainstorming. It's not legally binding." "I know," I replied. "That's not the point." He blinked rapidly, as if trying to catch up to the speed of consequences. "Then what is?" "That you let your family believe it mattered." I stepped closer. "You let them think they had a say in our home. You let them disrespect me openly, Because you were preparing for something behind my back. He swallowed hard. It's not like that. Then explain it. But he didn't. He couldn't. His silence stretched across the room like a cracked bridge, structurally unsound, one step away from collapse. I didn't want to worry you, he finally muttered. By hiding property documents? I raised an eyebrow. Or by allowing your sister to talk about better houses as if I'm temporary? He flinched. Good. It was the first honest reaction he'd given me in days. He sank onto the edge of the couch. I just wanted to explore options. My parents said they could help us find. There it is, I cut in. Your parents said something, and you listened. Because they talk loudly enough to drown out my respect. He looked up sharply. That's not true. You didn't defend me, I reminded. Not once. Not even when they mocked my job. My home. Me. His silence confirmed what we both already knew. I took a slow breath, keeping my tone level. Eric, you let them set the rules. And if you let someone else set the rules, you shouldn't be surprised when they decide the winner. That hit him. He looked away. Good. But this conversation wasn't the battle. It was reconnaissance. And I already had what I needed. I'm going to shower, I said calmly. We can talk later. He nodded, defeated. But I didn't go upstairs. Not yet. Because his phone lit up on the couch, the screen facing me just enough to catch my eye. A group chat. Family house discussion. My chest tightened, not with hurt. With adrenaline. I shouldn't read it. But he'd already broken the boundary. I was just confirming the pattern. I stepped closer. The latest message was from Lydia. Thursday. 7 p.m. our place. Let's show him the plan. She'll resist, but he needs to take control. Take control. A phrase that told me everything about how they saw me. Another message from his mother. He needs to be firm. If she doesn't agree, there are ways to make her uncomfortable enough to leave. Uncomfortable enough to leave. And then Eric had replied. A short, spineless message. I just need her to stay calm during the discussion. I don't want drama. Not I won't do this. Not she deserves respect. Not this is wrong. Just keep her calm. Because they thought I was predictable. Quiet. Peacekeeping. Avoidant. The funny thing? I am quiet. But quiet is not the same as powerless. Quiet is planning. I walked away from the phone, each step precise. I didn't need a screenshot. I didn't need proof of malice. I only needed one thing. For them to think I was still unaware. Thursday was 3 days away. 3 days to build the trap. 3 days to shift every rule they thought they'd written. 3 days to dismantle the entire structure of their entitlement. They wanted a discussion. They had no idea I was preparing a reckoning. By Thursday morning, the plan was no longer forming, it was set. Sharpened. Weighted. Balanced. The kind of plan built not from rage, but from precision. I wore my sea blue scarf again, letting it fall softly across my shoulders. A calm color for a controlled mind. I didn't need theatrics. I needed truth, timing, and a little bit of their own arrogance reflected back at them. At work, I had everything ready before noon. The authentic stamped deed from City Records. The fraudulent digital copy with Clause 14b. The metadata showing exactly who modified it and when. A printed transcript of the group chat messages I'd quietly observed on Eric's phone, not screenshots, but typed summaries for myself. I didn't plan to show them, I planned to use their own words in the right moment. But the final piece was something only I could orchestrate. I called Mrs. Farrell, our neighborhood association lead, someone I'd helped last year with a messy vendor contract issue. She respected me. She also disliked people who created chaos for others. Of course, I can stop by tonight, she said over the phone. You mentioned you needed a witness to a tenancy concern? Yes, I replied. If it escalates, I'd appreciate your presence. Always happy to support a neighbor who does things properly. Properly. Exactly the word Eric's family never understood. When I arrived home around 5, Eric was pacing the living room like a man preparing for a conversation he didn't want to have but couldn't avoid. He looked up quickly. You ready for tonight? He asked. Absolutely, I said. He seemed relieved, and that was the first sign he had no idea what was coming. We drove separately. I told him I had to grab something after work. In truth, I simply wanted my own vehicle, my own exit, my own control. When I pulled up in front of his parents' house at 7, the lights were already on. His family always gathered early, like a committee assembling before a vote. I stepped in, coat over my arm, scarf perfectly straight. They were all in the living room, his mother perched like royalty, his father with hands clasped, Lydia leaning against the wall smirking, and Eric standing in the center like a man caught between two worlds. Let's sit, his mother said, gesturing to the sofa as if inviting a stranger into her courtroom. I sat. Eric coughed awkwardly. We just want to talk about the future. About the house. About what's best for everyone. For everyone. Meaning them. His father leaned forward. We believe a relocation would benefit you both. To somewhere more aligned with Eric's long-term prospects. Lydia added, and with the clause, we can help make decisions as a family. I tilted my head. What clause? She smiled, triumphant. Clause 14b. Eric showed us everything. I blinked slowly. I see. I saw everything, actually. Especially how they had just walked into the exact wording I needed them to admit. Eric shot his sister a warning look, but it was too late, the air had shifted, and they didn't even realize it. His mother continued, we're not saying you have to leave tonight. But if you can agree to explore options, we can all move forward without conflict. Without conflict. A gentle way of saying, submit. I leaned back, crossing one leg over the other. Interesting. And you all feel you have a legal say? His father nodded. According to the clause, yes. That's your understanding? I asked quietly. A chorus of confident nods. Nobody hesitates when they think they're in control. Eric finally cut in. Can we just not make this hostile? We're all adults here. Hostile. The word sat between us like a challenge. I turned to him. I agree. Which is why I brought something. I reached into my bag and placed 2 folders on the coffee table. His mother eyed them skeptically. What are those? I opened the first folder slowly, deliberately, letting the stamped seal face them. This, I said, is the official deed for our home. Retrieved from city records this week. Eric paled. His parents stiffened. Lydia's smirk faltered. I placed my fingertip lightly on the document. As you can see, there is no clause 14b. No addendum. No mention of family involvement. Silence. Thick, cloying, stunned. His father frowned. There must be some mistake. There is, I replied. But not from city records. I opened the second folder. This is a printed copy of the fraudulent deed. Lydia shifted. Fraudulent? No, Eric printed that from. Yes, I interrupted gently. From a version he modified. Eric swallowed hard. I didn't, it was just an idea. Something Dad and I discussed. I held up a page of metadata. This shows exactly when the file was altered. Saturday morning at 7:13 a.m. Before you all came to my house and began criticizing it. Criticizing me. Criticizing everything you already intended to replace. His mother bristled. We were trying to help our son. I faced her calmly. Your son is a grown man. Helping is not the same as controlling. Eric's eyes darted between us, panic rising. He whispered, "Can we please not turn this into a legal matter?" I said. "Oh, I have no intention of that. You see, I know the clause is invalid. I know nothing you're proposing holds legal ground. Which means this isn't about law." I leaned in. "It's about respect. And boundary setting. And tonight, I am setting mine." Lydia scoffed, but it sounded less sure this time. "You can't just." "I can," I said softly. "Because while you were busy convincing Eric that you should have a say in our life, I was preparing something far simpler." They stiffened. I reached into my bag again, pulling out my phone. I invited a witness. A knock echoed at the front door. Right on cue. Eric blinked. "A witness?" His mother hissed, "What have you done?" I remained seated, serene. "Something proper." Eric opened the door. Mrs. Farrell stepped in, hair neatly pinned, clipboard in hand. "Good evening," she said, voice crisp. "I was asked to observe a tenancy-related meeting and ensure clarity of boundaries." Eric's family froze. His mother's face drained of color. "You brought the neighborhood association?" "I brought clarity," I corrected. Mrs. Farrell stepped forward. "Now, before emotions escalate, I'd like to document exactly what expectations each party has regarding the property." Eric's father stammered, we didn't, she wasn't supposed to." "Speak on my behalf?" I finished. "I agree." Mrs. Farrell lifted her pen. "Let's begin." Lydia snapped, "This is unnecessary." "Actually," Mrs. Farrell said sternly, "I understand a false legal clause was presented as fact. That is misconduct under community housing guidelines." Eric's family collectively stiffened. Eric himself looked like he might sink through the floor. I sat calmly on the sofa, scarf neat, posture straight. Because now the rules were mine. "I'm happy to speak first," I said. And in that moment, watching their faces crumble under the weight of their own scheme, I knew I had changed the game entirely. Mrs. Farrell adjusted her glasses, scanning the room with the calm authority of someone who'd supervised far uglier disputes. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The quiet way she took control was almost satisfying to witness. "Let's proceed," she said. "We'll begin with the homeowner, Mrs. Davenport." I almost smiled. Mrs. Davenport. They'd forgotten that I, too, bore the family name. Convenient, how quickly they erased me until they needed to weaponize it. I folded my hands in my lap. "Thank you. My position is simple. This home belongs to Eric and me equally. Any decisions regarding it must be discussed and agreed upon by both spouses, privately. Not presented as a group intervention, not coerced, not manipulated." His mother bristled. "This is absurd. We're his family." "Yes," I replied softly. "And I'm his wife." The words landed like a stone dropped into still water, small, silent, rippling outward. Mrs. Farrell nodded. "Noted. And the alleged clause?" I lifted the fraudulent document. "A fabricated edition. Invalid. Not legally binding. Presented to me as if it were real, used to justify their involvement." Lydia's face flushed. "We didn't fabricate anything, Eric told us it was official." "He told you what he wanted you to believe," I said. "Which is its own problem." Eric shifted, rubbing his temples. "Can we stop saying fabricate? It wasn't like that. It was exploratory." I set the metadata printout on the table. "Exploratory, at 7 in the morning, before your family arrived to criticize our house? Exploratory, when you showed them a version with a clause that didn't exist?" He stared at the table, trapped between guilt and the sudden realization that intentions don't erase consequences. Mrs. Farrell's voice remained clinical. "Mr. Davenport, did you inform your wife before altering the digital deed?" He swallowed. No. Did you intend for your family to believe the clause had power? A beat of silence. Then, I didn't stop them. Mrs. Farrell scribbled something. Understood. His mother shot up from her chair. This is turning into a witch hunt. He didn't do anything wrong. He was trying to improve their future. Mrs. Farrell eyed her calmly. Ma'am, presenting misinformation about property rights is a serious matter under association conduct. His mother's voice cracked. We didn't know it was misinformation. Intent does not erase impact, Mrs. Farrell said. The room thickened with tension. Eric was pale. His father stared at the floor. Lydia looked like she wanted to disappear. Perfect. They weren't being humiliated, they were being held accountable. Quietly. Logically. Without yelling or chaos. The exact opposite of what they expected from me. We're not here to punish anyone, I said, turning to each of them. We're here to clarify something you've all been ignoring. My voice didn't rise. If anything, it softened. You crossed boundaries. You disrespected me openly in my home. And Eric allowed it because he thought a fake clause gave him leverage. Eric winced. You treated me like someone who could be moved aside, I continued. Someone without agency or intelligence. Someone whose silence meant permission. But you forgot who I am, what I do, and what I will not tolerate. The chipped mug sat in my memory again, small, cracked, underrated. Just like they'd hoped I'd be. Mrs. Farrell tapped her pen. Based on what I'm hearing, the association will be issuing a boundary notice. It will document the following: that the extended family has no authority or involvement in property decisions, that presenting false information constitutes misconduct, and that any further interference may result in formal review. Formal review. A phrase that, coming from her, landed like a legal warning. His father stiffened. Lydia swallowed hard. His mother's lips parted in disbelief. Eric whispered, "Is that really necessary?" Mrs. Farrell looked him straight in the eye. Yes. Because you allowed misinformation to be presented as fact. That is inappropriate in any housing community. He ran a trembling hand over his face. Look, he murmured, turning to me. I'm sorry, okay? This got out of hand. I didn't move. You let it get out of hand. His mother snapped, "Stop blaming him. You're overreacting." I turned my head slowly. Overreacting? My tone was quiet, measured. Is it overreacting to want control over my home? To want honesty from my husband? To expect respect from people who live somewhere else but feel entitled to dictate my life? His father cleared his throat. We just wanted what's best for Eric. And I want what's best for us, I replied. But if best means sacrificing my dignity, then no. I won't participate in that version of family. Another knock sounded at the door. This time, it was Fate's version of punctuation. Mrs. Farrell opened it, revealing two neighbors, a retired couple she'd asked to accompany her as secondary witnesses. People who lived 3 houses down. People who, until tonight, had never thought twice about us. His mother gasped. You brought the neighbors? Mrs. Farrell nodded firmly. Given the severity of the misinformation presented, yes. Transparency is crucial. Eric rocked back on his heels, face draining. His parents looked mortified. Lydia turned away, hand covering her mouth. This was it, the shift. Not humiliation. Illumination. They were exposed, not by me yelling, but by their own actions laid bare in front of impartial eyes. Mrs. Farrell addressed the room. I'll be filing the boundary notice tonight. I expect full cooperation from all parties. His father muttered, "This is unbelievable." I stood, the room strangely still. I told you, I said quietly, I don't fight when I already know how the outcome ends. My scarf fell into place as I lifted my bag. Eric stepped forward. Please, just wait. Let's go home and talk. I shook my head. There's nothing left to discuss tonight. But, his voice cracked. I looked at him, truly looked at him. You let them disrespect me. You let them plan around me. You let them think they had power over my life. The rules have changed now. I'm the one setting them. His family stared at me with a mix of regret, fear, and dawning understanding. Mrs. Farrell held the door. I walked out into the cool night air, every step steady, measured, earned. Quiet power. Not explosive revenge. Just boundaries, unshakable, undeniable, unmistakably mine. I didn't sleep much that night, not from turmoil, but from clarity. Real clarity. The kind you feel after a storm has passed and the debris finally stops moving. I made tea, wrapped my sea blue scarf around me, and sat at the kitchen table with my chipped mug beside me like an old ally. The house was quiet. Still. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, I felt something returning to me, my space, my breath, my autonomy. Eric didn't come home until after midnight. I heard the door but didn't look up. He hovered in the doorway of the kitchen, shoulders slumped, eyes red-rimmed. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in a single evening. I messed up, he said softly. I know. He pulled out a chair, hesitated, then sat. The silence between us wasn't hostile, it was honest. Raw. Unfiltered. They're furious, he said. My mom. Lydia, they acted like you humiliated them. I didn't humiliate anyone, I replied. I corrected a lie they willingly participated in. He winced as if the truth stung more than accusations. I didn't think it would go this far. I took a slow sip of tea. That's because you weren't thinking about consequences. You were thinking about convenience. He looked at my mug, the small chip glinting faintly. When did I become this person? You didn't become him overnight, I said. You let him grow. He rubbed his forehead. I'm sorry. Truly. I know sorry isn't enough, but I am. I believe you, I said. But forgiveness doesn't erase accountability. His eyes lifted. What does it mean for us? That was the question he'd been afraid to ask since the moment he walked in. I breathed in slowly. It means things change. Immediately. He braced himself. Change how? I slid a folder across the table, the authentic deed, the city records copy, and a simple agreement I'd typed up earlier. His eyebrows lifted. What's this? Boundaries, I replied. Real ones. He opened it and read silently. The agreement wasn't harsh. It wasn't vindictive. It was clear. No property decisions without both spouses present. No extended family involvement of any kind. No sharing documents or discussing private matters outside our marriage. Therapy, both individual and couples, as a non-negotiable. A 90-day review period to assess whether trust can be rebuilt. I'm not leaving, I added calmly. Not my home. Not my life. Not my dignity. He swallowed. I don't want you to leave. I know. But you allowed your family to treat me as if my place was conditional. So now, you show me, with action, not promises, that you understand it isn't. He nodded slowly, absorbing each word, the way a student absorbs a lesson they should have learned years earlier. This is fair, he whispered at last. More than fair. I'll sign it. And your family? He looked down. I'll handle them. I watched him for a moment. There was sincerity there, real sincerity, but sincerity isn't the same as repair. Repair takes work, time, consistency. Eric, I said gently, I don't need you to fight them. I need you to choose us. Actively. Daily. He nodded, eyes glistening. I will. I believed he meant it. Whether he'd deliver, that was what the next 90 days would prove. The fallout in the neighborhood spread quickly, not because I told anyone, but because people talk. They always do. Word travels faster in communities where people pretend not to pay attention but absolutely do. By Saturday afternoon, Lydia posted a passive-aggressive quote on social media about betrayal by people you open your home to. She failed to notice the irony. His mother avoided me entirely, which, frankly, was the greatest peace offering she could have made. His father sent a stiff apology through Eric. Formal, rehearsed, but still an apology. But none of their reactions mattered. My boundaries didn't depend on their behavior, they depended on mine. Mrs. Farrell stopped by that afternoon with a copy of the filed boundary notice. Not many people handle situations like that with composure, she said at my doorstep. Composure is a language people underestimate, I replied. She smiled knowingly. They won't interfere again. Good. 3 weeks passed. Eric attended therapy. Alone at first. He came home quieter, less defensive, more reflective. He didn't push. Didn't plead. Didn't deflect. At night, he started asking questions he'd never asked before. How long have you felt disrespected? When did you stop feeling heard? What can I do that isn't temporary? For the first time in years, he was listening, not to respond, but to understand. One evening, after a long session, he sat across from me at the dining table. I never realized how much I let them steer my life, he said. How much I used you as the buffer. I'm sorry. Awareness is the first step, I said. He gave a faint, grateful smile. And the second? Consistency. He nodded. And he kept showing up. Little things mattered the most. Defending me when his mother tried to guilt him. Shutting down Lydia's manipulative comments. Making decisions with me, not around me. Asking before assuming. Owning his mistakes without excuses. Those weren't grand gestures. They were daily ones. And those are the ones marriages are built on, or rebuilt on. The day the 90 days ended, he handed me a small box. Inside was a mug. Sea blue. Ceramic. Unchipped. Not to replace the old one. To sit next to it. I'm learning, he said softly. I wrapped my scarf tighter around my shoulders and nodded. You are. He took my hand. Do you want to keep rebuilding with me? I looked at him, really looked, and saw a man who had walked through shame, reflection, discomfort, and accountability, and was still willing to keep walking. Yes, I said. Because forgiveness without accountability is resignation. But forgiveness with accountability? That's strength. As for his family, they learned, too. Not through me, but through the consequences of their own behavior. They stayed away. They stayed respectful when they did reach out. They stopped meddling because the boundary notice wasn't a warning, it was a door, clearly marked. Enter respectfully, or don't enter at all. Standing in my kitchen weeks later, the chipped mug on one side of me, the new one on the other, I realized something important. They hadn't underestimated my intelligence. They had underestimated my silence. But silence isn't surrender. Silence is strategy. And in the end, I didn't just change the rules of the game. I wrote new ones.